The Resolute was not a warship, but it was not small either. It was a diplomatic carrier built to move important people through dangerous space. It had thick armor plating, a medical bay, a small hangar for shuttles, and enough supplies to last 6 months. Its crew was 32 people, all hand-picked by Earth's Central Command. Ethan Marsh was one of them. He was 24 years old and had been a communications officer for exactly 9 months. He had never left the solar system before. When the Resolute jumped into its first hyperspace corridor and the stars outside stretched into long white lines, Ethan gripped the edge of his console and tried very hard not to throw up. The jump lasted 3 hours. When they came out the other side, they were in a part of space Ethan had only seen in textbooks. The stars were different here, closer together, brighter, arranged in patterns that no human had named. Sam spent most of the first 2 days in his cabin. He told himself he was resting, but the truth was he did not know what to do with himself. He was not a diplomat. He was not a scientist. He was a man who delivered things from one place to another, and now he was on a ship, heading to the most dangerous world in the known galaxy. On the 3rd day, Katie knocked on his door. "Come walk with me," she said. "I want to show you something." She led him to a small room near the back of the ship that she had turned into a workspace. The walls were covered with screens, and every screen was filled with alien writing, sharp, angular symbols that looked like claw marks in wet stone. "This is Velkari script," Katie said, "or at least the version of it that other species have been able to record. The Velkari have a spoken language, a written language, a chemical language based on scent, and a subsonic language that humans cannot even hear. When the Queen speaks, she uses all 4 at the same time." Sam stared at the symbols on the walls. "And you can understand this?" "Parts of it. Small parts." Katie pulled up a recording on one of the screens. A sound filled the room, deep, layered, like stones grinding together underwater. "This is a Velkari greeting. It roughly translates to, 'I see you, I measure you, I decide your worth.'" "Friendly people," Sam said. Katie smiled. "They are not people. That is the first thing you need to understand. The Velkari do not think like us. They do not feel like us. Their queen is not a leader the way we understand leaders. She is the mind of her entire species. Every Velkari is connected to her in some way. When she makes a decision, it is not just her decision. It is the decision of billions. So when she summoned us, every Velkari in the Dominion knows we are coming. Every single one." "Katie, what do you think she wants?" Katie was quiet for a moment. She turned off the recording and looked at him. "I do not know, but I have studied every record of the Velkari interacting with other species. There is a pattern. When they find a new civilization, they watch it for a long time, sometimes centuries. They study it. They learn everything about it. And then, when they are ready, they bring that civilization's leaders to Ashari Prime and give them a choice." "What choice?" "Submit or be destroyed. Every species in the Galactic Concord has either accepted Velkari authority or been wiped out. There are no exceptions." Sam leaned against the wall. "Then why are we even going, if the answer is always the same?" "Because this time might be different," Katie said. "It has to be different. Because if it is not, then nothing we do matters anyway." Sam did not have an answer for that. On the 5th day, they passed through the second hyperspace corridor. When they came out, the Resolute sensors picked up signals from Velkari relay stations. They were inside Dominion territory now. The crew became quieter. Conversations in the hallways stopped. People moved through the ship with tight faces and careful steps, as if they were walking through a house that did not belong to them. Danny spent his time in the small armory, checking weapons he knew he would probably never use. Sam found him there on the 7th day, sitting on a crate and cleaning a rifle with slow, careful movements. "You know that thing will not help us if this goes wrong," Sam said. "I know," Danny said, "but it makes me feel better." Sam sat down across from him. "You ever think about what happened at the border? When I ran into that patrol." Danny stopped cleaning the rifle. "You mean when you nearly got yourself killed?" "Yeah, that." "I think about it," Danny said. "I think about the fact that a Valkyrie warship had you dead to rights, and you just started talking, like you were ordering coffee." "I was not that calm." "You sounded calm. I heard the recording. Everyone heard the recording." Sam shook his head. "I was terrified, Danny. I talked because I did not know what else to do. There was no plan. There was no clever idea. I just opened my mouth, and words came out." Danny looked at him for a long time. "And that is exactly why you are here. Because every other person on Earth would have either frozen or tried to fight. You did neither. You just talked to them like they were people." "They are not people. Katie told me that." "Maybe not. But you treated them like they were. And they let you live." On the 9th day, Nate Greer gathered everyone in the briefing room. He stood at the front with his hands clasped behind his back, and his face more serious than Sam had ever seen it. "We enter the final hyperspace corridor tomorrow," Nate said. "When we come out, we will be in orbit above HFY Prime. A shuttle will take our envoy team down to the surface. The team will be myself, Miss Lawson, Sergeant Cole, and Mr. Hayden." He paused. "I want to be honest with all of you. We do not know what the Queen wants. We do not know if this is a negotiation, a trial, or a death sentence. But we are going because Earth does not run from a conversation, no matter how frightening it is." Nobody spoke. Ethan Marsh, sitting at the back, swallowed hard and tried to look brave. Nate continued. "If something goes wrong on the surface, and we do not return, the Resolute is to leave Dominion space immediately and report back to Earth. Do not attempt a rescue. Do not send a second team. Just go home and tell them what happened." The room was heavy with silence. Sam stood up. Everyone looked at him. He was not sure why he was standing. He had no speech prepared. He was a freight pilot from Ohio. "Look," he said, "I do not know any of you very well, and I am probably the least qualified person on this ship to be doing any of this. But 3 years ago, I talked to a Valkyrie for the first time, and the one thing I learned is that they listen. They might be ancient. They might be powerful enough to crush us without trying, but they listen. And as long as someone is listening, there is a chance." It was not a great speech. It was not the kind of speech they put in movies. But Danny nodded, and Katie smiled, and Ethan Marsh stopped looking like he was about to pass out. On the 11th day, the Resolute dropped out of hyperspace. HFY Prime filled the viewport like a bruise against the stars. It was enormous, 3 times the size of Earth, wrapped in thick clouds of purple and gray. Lightning moved across its surface in slow, massive waves, lighting up entire continents for brief moments. Even from orbit, Sam could see the cities. They were everywhere, covering mountains, spanning oceans, climbing into the atmosphere on towers so tall they nearly reached space. And the ships. Hundreds of Valkyrie ships drifted in orbit around the planet, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. Their shapes were organic, curved, like the shells of sea creatures grown to impossible size. They glided, slow and silent, as if the emptiness of space was water and they were swimming through it. Ethan stared at his screen. His fingers were shaking, but he typed the message carefully. "We have arrived," he sent to Earth Command. "God help us." Then the Valkyrie sent a docking signal, and the shuttle bay doors opened. It was time. The shuttle was small. It held 6 people at most, and right now it held 4. Sam, Katie, Danny, and Nate. A pilot from the Resolute flew them down. Nobody spoke during the descent. Sam watched through the window as they broke through the cloud layer. The first thing he noticed was the color. Everything on Ashari Prime was dark. The sky was a deep, bruised purple, like a sunset that never ended. The ground below was black and gray, covered in structures that stretched as far as Sam could see in every direction. The city was alive. That was the only way to describe it. The buildings were not made of metal or stone like human cities. They looked like they had been grown. Tall spires of black material that curved and twisted like coral, connected by bridges that pulsed with faint blue light. Sam could see them, shifting slowly, leaning toward the shuttle as it passed overhead, as if they were watching. "The structures are partially biological," Katie said quietly. She was gripping her tablet so hard her knuckles were white. "The Velkhari grow their cities. The buildings are alive." Danny looked out the window and said nothing. His jaw was tight, and his hand rested on his thigh, close to where his sidearm sat in its holster. He had been told he could bring the weapon, but not use it under any circumstances. He had agreed to those terms, but Sam could see the tension in his shoulders. Nate sat perfectly still, with his hands folded in his lap. His face was blank, the careful mask of a man who had spent decades hiding what he really felt. But Sam noticed that Nate's left foot was tapping against the floor in a fast, nervous rhythm. The shuttle descended toward a landing platform near the base of the largest structure Sam had ever seen. It was a tower, but calling it a tower was like calling the ocean a puddle. It rose from the ground and disappeared into the dark clouds above, wider than most human cities, and covered in glowing symbols that shifted and changed like living things. When the shuttle touched down, the hatch opened. Warm air flooded inside, thick, heavy, carrying a smell that was sweet and sharp at the same time, like flowers mixed with metal. Sam's lungs took a moment to adjust. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's. Not enough to hurt, but enough that Sam could feel the extra weight pressing down on his bones. They stepped out. A squad of Velkhari soldiers stood waiting for them. Sam had seen images of Velkhari before, but images did not prepare him for the real thing. They were tall, each one at least 8 feet, covered in dark carapace that looked like armor, but was part of their bodies. Their faces were angular, with 4 eyes arranged in pairs, and mouths that split into 3 parts when they opened. They had 4 arms, 2 large ones and 2 smaller ones folded against their chests. They moved with a smooth, careful grace that reminded Sam of large cats. None of them spoke. One of the soldiers made a gesture with its upper right arm, a slow, sweeping motion that pointed toward the tower. It was clear enough. Follow. They followed. The interior of the tower was dark, lit only by the faint bioluminescent glow coming from the walls. The corridors were enormous, wide enough for 10 humans to walk side by side, and tall enough that the ceiling vanished into shadow above them. The floor was smooth and warm under Sam's boots. Every surface was covered in carvings, deep, detailed engravings that showed scenes Sam could not fully understand. Great battles, entire worlds consumed by darkness, species bowing before a figure seated on a massive throne. Katie moved close to one wall and ran her fingers over the carvings without touching them. "These are their history," she whispered. "Thousands of years of conquest, every species they have encountered, every world they have taken." Sam looked at one panel that showed a group of small hunched figures kneeling before a towering Velkhari. The small figures had their arms raised, and their faces, if they had faces, were twisted in what looked like fear. "That species," Katie said, following his gaze. "The Kethrali. They were a spacefaring civilization that existed about 4,000 years ago. They submitted to the Dominion without a fight." "Where are they now?" Sam asked. Katie was quiet for a moment. They do not exist anymore. Within a few centuries, their culture, their language, their identity, all of it was gone. They became part of the Dominion. Just another piece. Danny looked at the carving. So even submitting does not save you. It saves your bodies, Katie said, not your soul. They walked for what felt like an hour. The corridors twisted and turned, sometimes climbing, sometimes descending. Sam lost all sense of direction. The soldiers never paused, never looked back. They moved as one, perfectly synchronized, as if controlled by a single mind. Then they reached the doors. They were massive, 50 feet tall, carved from the same black material as everything else. Symbols glowed across their surface in slow, pulsing patterns. 2 Valkyrie guards stood on either side, each one bigger than the soldiers who had escorted them. These were not ordinary soldiers. They wore additional armor, real armor, layered over their carapace, and they each carried weapons that hummed with a low, vibrating energy. The guards looked down at the 4 humans. 8 alien eyes studied them with cold, measured attention. Then the doors opened. The sound hit Sam first. Not a loud sound, but a deep one, a vibration that he felt in his chest more than he heard with his ears. It was the combined breathing, shifting, and movement of thousands of Valkyrie, all gathered in one place. The throne chamber of Ashari Prime was the largest enclosed space Sam had ever seen. The floor was polished black stone that reflected the faint light from above. The walls stretched up and up and up until they disappeared into total darkness. It was like standing inside a mountain that had been hollowed out. Thousands of Valkyrie lined both sides of the chamber. They stood in rows, organized by rank, each one motionless and silent. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, amber, gold, pale orange, creating a field of tiny lights on either side that stretched into the distance. At the far end of the chamber, raised on a platform that seemed to grow from the floor itself, was the throne. It was alive. There was no other way to describe it. The throne was made of the same biological material as the buildings outside, and it moved, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like something breathing in its sleep. Dark tendrils spread from its base across the floor, and seated on it was Queen Sathari Velrun. Sam had tried to prepare himself for this moment. He had looked at every image, read every description, studied every report. None of it mattered. The queen was enormous. She was at least 12 feet tall, even seated. Her carapace was darker than the soldiers, deep violet and black, with faint patterns that shimmered like oil on water. She had 6 eyes, arranged in 2 rows of 3, and each one glowed with a steady amber light. Her face was angular and sharp, with mandibles that moved slightly, as if she were tasting the air. She had 6 arms, 4 folded in her lap, and 2 resting on the arms of the living throne. She looked ancient. Not old in the way humans looked old, but ancient in the way that mountains looked ancient, as if she had existed so long that time itself had become irrelevant to her. Every eye in the chamber was on the 4 humans. Sam felt the weight of those gazes like a physical thing pressing against his skin. His heart was beating fast, and his mouth had gone dry. Beside him, Katie was breathing in short, controlled breaths. Danny stood rigid, every muscle locked. Nate walked forward with his chin up, but Sam could see the sweat on the back of his neck. They stopped 30 feet from the throne. The escort soldiers stepped aside and vanished into the shadows. A figure emerged from beside the throne. This one was different from the others, thinner, taller, wrapped in layers of dark fabric that moved like smoke. Its eyes were a deeper shade of amber, almost red. This was Rakan, the Queen's chief advisor. Rakan looked down at the humans. His mandibles spread wide, in what Katie had told Sam was an expression of disgust. He spoke in the Velkari language, a deep layered sound that echoed off the walls. Katie translated in a tight whisper. "He is announcing us. He calls us the delegation from the young world. He says we are here at the Queen's command." Rakan's tone shifted. It became sharper, harder. "He says we should feel honored," Katie continued. "He says lesser species are not normally permitted to stand in this chamber." Sam looked at the Queen. She had not moved. She had not spoken. She simply sat on her living throne and watched them with all 6 eyes. And in those eyes Sam saw something that made his stomach drop. She was not angry. She was not curious. She was measuring them. The way a person measured something before deciding whether to keep it or throw it away. Then the Queen opened her mouth, and the entire chamber went silent. Her voice was unlike anything Sam had ever heard. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It came from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. It was deep and layered, with harmonics that Sam could feel vibrating in his bones. She spoke a single sentence. Katie's face went pale. She gripped Sam's arm. "She says she has been watching us," Katie whispered, "for longer than we know." The silence after the Queen's words was so deep that Sam could hear his own blood moving through his veins. Nobody moved. The thousands of Velkari nobles lining the chamber stood like statues, their glowing eyes fixed on the 4 humans standing before the throne. Nate Greer recovered first. He was a diplomat. This was what he had trained for his entire life. He straightened his back, adjusted his collar, and stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice steady and practiced. "On behalf of the United Earth Council, the Mars Governance Board, and all human territories, I bring greetings, and—" The Queen raised one hand, just one, a small movement, and Nate stopped talking, as if someone had pressed a button on his throat. It was not a threat. It was just power. The kind of power that did not need to explain itself. The Queen spoke again. Her voice filled every corner of the vast chamber, rolling across the stone like distant thunder. Katie listened with her head slightly tilted, her lips moving as she worked through the sounds. "She says she did not summon us for greetings," Katie translated. "She says human words are pleasant but empty, like the songs of small animals. She says she wants to speak plainly." Nate looked like a man who had just been told his entire career was worthless. He took a small step back and said nothing. The Queen continued. She spoke for a long time, and her voice shifted as she went, sometimes deep and slow, sometimes sharp and fast, like a river changing speed as it moved over different ground. Rakan stood beside her with his arms folded, watching the humans with open contempt. Katie translated in pieces, pausing between sentences to make sure she had the meaning right. "She says the Velkari first detected humanity 160 years ago, when our radio signals reached the edge of Dominion space. She says they have watched us since then. They watched us split the atom. They watched us fight our wars. They watched us reach our moon, then our neighboring planets, then the stars." Katie paused. Her voice was shaking slightly, but she kept going. "She says that every species in the galaxy follows the same path. They grow, they build, they reach the stars, and then they face a choice. They either destroy themselves with their own weapons, or they encounter the Dominion and submit." The Queen leaned forward on her throne. The living material beneath her shifted, tendrils curling and uncurling like fingers. "She says humanity is an anomaly. We did not destroy ourselves, but we also did not submit. We joined the Galactic Concord. We built our colonies. We expanded into space. And when we learned about the Velkari Dominion, we simply continued as if they did not matter." Danny made a small sound, almost a laugh. Danny's face was hard, but there was something in his eyes that might have been pride. The Queen spoke again, and this time her voice dropped lower. The harmonics changed. Sam felt the vibrations in his teeth. Katie swallowed. She says the Galactic Concord, every alliance, every federation, every empire that exists in this galaxy, they all serve the Dominion in the end. Some do it openly, some do it quietly, but all of them acknowledge Valkyri's supremacy. All of them except one. The Queen raised one long clawed finger and pointed it directly at Sam. No, not at Sam. At all of them. At the 4 small, fragile humans standing on her floor. She says humanity is the only species in the history of the galaxy that has looked at the Valkyrie Dominion and said nothing. Not yes, not no, just nothing. As if we did not even notice. Rakan hissed something. Several nobles in the front rows shifted their weight, their carapaces clicking softly. The atmosphere in the chamber tightened like a rope being pulled. Then the Queen stood. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Every Valkyrie in the chamber lowered their heads. The movement was instant and unified. Thousands of beings dropping their gazes at once, like a wave. Rakan himself bent slightly at the waist. The Queen was tall when seated. Standing, she was something else entirely. 12 feet of dark, shimmering carapace. 6 arms unfolding slowly. 6 eyes burning with steady amber light. She stepped down from the throne, and each step sent a faint tremor through the floor. She walked toward them, slowly, each step deliberate. Sam's body screamed at him to run. Every survival instinct he had was firing at once, telling him he was standing in front of something that could end him without effort. His legs wanted to move. His hands wanted to shake. But he stood still, because running would not help, and because Katie was standing next to him and she was not running either. The Queen stopped 10 feet away. She looked down at them. The size difference was almost absurd. 4 small humans looking up at a being that could crush any of them with one hand. She spoke, and her voice was different now, softer, almost gentle, and somehow that was the most frightening thing Sam had heard since they arrived. Katie translated, and her voice cracked on the first word. She says she has a demand. She says this is not a negotiation. She says this is not a discussion. She says this is a statement of what will happen. The chamber was completely still. She demands that humanity surrender its entire military fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every station. She demands that humanity dissolve all colonial territories and withdraw to Earth and Earth alone. Danny's hand moved toward his sidearm. He did not touch it, but his fingers hovered an inch away. She demands that humanity accept permanent servitor status within the Valkyrie Dominion. Humanity will serve the Dominion in whatever capacity the Queen decides. In exchange, Katie paused. In exchange, she says humanity will be protected. The word hung in the air like smoke. Protected, Danny said. His voice was flat and hard. Sam stared up at the Queen. She stared back. Her 6 eyes were unreadable, ancient, patient, absolutely certain. She says if we refuse, Katie continued, her voice barely above a whisper, we will be the 41st world to fall. She says the Dominion has never failed to conquer a species that refused. Not once in 9,000 years. Nate Greer's face had gone gray. He looked like a man watching everything he had ever worked for collapse into dust. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Then the Queen added one final line. She spoke it almost casually, the way someone might mention the weather. Katie blinked. Her eyebrows rose. She looked at Sam with an expression he could not read. She says she would rather not destroy us, Katie said slowly. She says she finds us interesting. The word interesting landed in Sam's mind and stayed there. He turned it over, examined it, tried to understand what it meant, coming from a being who had ruled 40 worlds for 9,000 years. Interesting. Not dangerous. Not impressive. Interesting. Like a bug that had done something unexpected. The queen stood before them, waiting. She was in no rush. She had all the time in the universe. She had made her demand, and now she waited for the small, fragile creatures in front of her to respond. Sam looked at Nate. Nate was frozen. Sam looked at Danny. Danny looked ready to fight an entire alien civilization with his bare hands. Sam looked at Katie. Katie looked back at him with wide eyes and gave him the smallest nod, as if she knew what was about to happen before he did. Sam took a breath. Then he stepped forward. He did not know what he was going to say. He did not have a plan. He did not have a speech. He was a freight pilot from Ashland, Ohio, and he was standing in front of the queen of the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known, and she had just told him his entire species was about to be enslaved. Into those 6 ancient amber eyes, and something in his chest that was not courage, but was close to it. Something that felt more like stubbornness, a deep, quiet, unreasonable refusal to bend, rose up and settled into his spine like iron. He opened his mouth, and he told her, no. Sam did not shout. He did not pound his chest. He did not make threats. He just talked. Katie translated his words as he spoke, her voice steadier now, as if his calm had given her something to hold on to. He told the queen he was not a diplomat. He told her he was nobody important. He said he was a freight pilot who grew up in a small town in Ohio, where his mother made eggs in the morning and his father came home with grease on his hands every night. He said he had no authority to speak for Earth, no title, no power, and no training for any of this. Then he told her something else. He said that humans had been told to kneel before, many times, by kings and emperors and dictators, and men who believed they had the right to own other men. He said that every time it happened, most people did kneel. Most people were afraid, and that was fair, because the people demanding obedience usually had swords and guns and armies. But every time, he said, there was at least one fool who stood up and said no. Not because that person was brave, not because they thought they could win, but because something inside them, something stubborn and unreasonable and impossible to kill, would not let them kneel. It was not logic. It was not strategy. It was just what humans did. They refused, even when it was stupid, even when it cost them everything. He told the queen that humanity had burned its own cities. He told her they had fought wars that killed millions. He told her they had done terrible things to each other, things that would probably disgust any species watching from the outside. He said he was not proud of all of it. But he said that every single time humanity knocked itself down, it got back up. They buried their dead, they rebuilt their homes, and they kept going, not because they were strong, because they did not know how to stop. He said that was the one thing the queen had clearly understood about humanity, and it was the one thing she had underestimated. Earth will not kneel, he said. Not today, not to you, not to anyone, not because we are brave or special or powerful. We are not any of those things. We are just stubborn. We are stubborn in a way that does not make sense, and we know it does not make sense, and we do it anyway. He said it simply, without anger, without pride. He said it the way a man states that the sky is blue, not as an opinion, but as a fact of the universe. Then he stopped talking. The chamber was silent. 10,000 Velkari stood motionless. Rakan's mandibles were spread wide, in fury. Nate Greer had his hand over his mouth. Danny stood behind Sam, with his arms at his sides, and his chin up. And if Sam had turned around, he would have seen that Danny's eyes were wet. The queen stared at Sam. She stared at him for a long time. Her 6 amber eyes moved across his face, studying him the way one studies a puzzle that has just revealed an unexpected answer. Then Rakan broke the silence. He stepped forward and spoke in a rapid, furious stream of Velkhari. His voice was sharp and loud, cutting through the chamber like a blade. Several nobles along the walls began to stir, clicking and hissing in agreement. Katie translated in a tight whisper. He says Sam has insulted the Queen. He says the punishment for refusing the Queen's demand is annihilation. He is asking her to give the order. Sam did not move. He kept his eyes on the Queen. The Queen raised one hand, and Rakan fell silent instantly. The nobles went still. The entire chamber froze, as if time itself had stopped. Then Queen Sethari Velrune did something that no living Velkhari had ever seen before. She laughed. It was a low sound, deep and resonant, like stones shifting deep underground. It vibrated through the floor, and up through Sam's legs, and into his chest. It was not a human laugh. It did not mean the same thing a human laugh meant, but there was something in it, something warm and surprised and real, that Sam recognized. Every Velkhari in the chamber flinched. Rakan stumbled backward as if he had been struck. The nobles pressed against the walls, their glowing eyes wide. The Queen's laughter faded, and she spoke one sentence, just one, short and clear. Katie's eyes went wide, her mouth fell open. She says, that is exactly the answer she was hoping for. The chamber erupted. Nobles hissed and clicked. Rakan shouted something that sounded like a protest. The organized silence of the court shattered into chaos. But the Queen ignored all of it. She stepped closer to Sam, so close that he could feel the warmth radiating from her carapace. She lowered herself, bending her great body until her 6 eyes were level with his too. This close, Sam could see the details of her face, the fine lines in her carapace, the way her mandibles moved with small, precise motions, the depth of those amber eyes, not cold, not cruel, but old, unbelievably, impossibly old. She spoke again, and this time her voice was quiet. It was the voice of someone who was tired of pretending. Katie translated carefully, word by word. She says the Velkhari have ruled for 9,000 years. In that time, they have encountered 412 spacefaring civilizations. Every single one either destroyed itself or submitted to the Dominion. Every one. She looked at Sam, as if she were seeing him clearly for the first time. She says the Dominion grew powerful. It grew vast. It grew beyond anything the galaxy had ever known. But it also grew still, predictable. Every challenge was met with the same answer. Every problem was solved with the same solution. Submit or be destroyed. Submit or be destroyed. For 9,000 years. Katie's voice grew softer as she translated. She says her people are dying. Not from war or disease, from boredom, from the slow death of a civilization that has never been told no. They have forgotten what it means to struggle. They have forgotten what it means to face something they cannot simply crush. The Queen reached out with one of her smaller hands and held it in the air near Sam's face. She did not touch him. She just held it there, as if measuring the space between them. She says that when her scouts first found humanity, she did not believe the reports. A species that fought itself constantly. A species that nearly destroyed its own world and then decided to save it. A species that looked at the stars and instead of being afraid, built ships and flew into the darkness. A species that every other civilization in the Concord warned her about, not because humans were strong, but because humans were unpredictable. The Queen pulled her hand back. She says she did not summon us to demand surrender. She summoned us to see if we would refuse. She needed to know if humans were truly what she believed, or if we would fold, like every species before us. Sam stood there, looking into those ancient eyes, and he understood. He understood with a sudden, painful clarity that made his chest ache. The most powerful being in the galaxy had not been threatening them, hoping that for the first time in 9,000 years, someone would stand in front of her and say no. She was lonely. Not lonely in the way a person is lonely when they are alone in a room. Lonely in the way a mountain is lonely when it is the only thing above the clouds. Lonely in the way that only something truly powerful can be, because power without challenge is just emptiness wearing a crown. The Queen spoke her final demand, and this time it was not a command. It was a request. She wants an alliance, Katie said, and there were tears on her face. A real alliance, between equals. She wants humanity to stand beside the Valkyrie, to challenge them, to argue with them, to tell them when they are wrong, to be the one species in the galaxy that will look the Dominion in the eye and refuse to look away. The Queen's mandibles twitched, a Valkyrie version of a smile. She says she does not need another servant. She has billions of servants. She needs a partner. Sam let out a long, slow breath. He looked at those 6 amber eyes, and in that moment, the most powerful queen in the galaxy and a freight pilot from Ohio understood each other completely. "Well," Sam said quietly, "you probably should have just led with that." Katie laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh, the kind that escapes before you can stop it. She covered her mouth, but she was smiling. Danny shook his head. "I cannot believe a freight pilot just negotiated an alliance with an alien empire." Nate Greer walked to the nearest surface he could find, a low bench along the wall that might have been alive, and sat down heavily. He loosened his collar and stared at the floor. "I need a new career," he said to no one in particular. The Queen straightened to her full height and addressed the chamber. Her voice was commanding again, ringing off the walls with the authority of 9,000 years. Rahan stood in shock, his mandibles opening and closing without sound. The nobles fell silent, one by one, as the Queen spoke. Katie did not translate all of it. She did not need to. The tone was enough. It was an announcement, a declaration, something new. A noble near the front, a smaller Valkyrie with lighter carapace and careful, watchful eyes, stepped forward and bowed to the Queen. Then she turned and bowed to Sam. It was a shallow bow, but it was real. "That is Yathara," Katie whispered. "She is the first one to accept it." One by one, others followed. Not all of them, not most of them, but enough. Sam watched it happen and felt something he had not felt in a long time. He was not sure what to call it. It was not happiness exactly. It was more like the feeling of putting something down that he had been carrying for a very long time without knowing it. Hours later, back on the shuttle, rising through the purple sky of Eshari Prime, Danny sat across from Sam and handed him a bottle of water. "So," Danny said, "what do we do now?" Sam took the water and drank. He looked out the window at the alien world shrinking below them, at the massive ships in orbit, at the stars beyond. "I have no idea," he said, "but I think we just made a friend." Danny snorted. A 12-foot alien queen with 6 arms and 6 eyes. "Could be worse," Sam said. "How?" "She could have said no." Danny thought about that, and then nodded. Above on the Resolute, Ethan Marsh received the shuttle's transmission. He read it at his console. Then he leaned back in his chair and let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like 11 days. He typed a message to Earth Central Command. His fingers were steady for the first time since the journey began. "They want to be friends," he sent. "Repeat, they want to be friends. Please advise." He hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a response. Then he smiled. Somewhere far below, on a dark world lit by bioluminescent towers and orbited by ships the size of mountains, A queen sat back on her living throne, and for the first time in a very long time, looked forward to what would happen next. Sam Hayden was 3 days out from Mars when his life changed forever. He was sitting in the cockpit of his old freight ship, the Drifter, eating cold noodles from a plastic container and watching the stars slide past. The ship was carrying mining equipment to a station in the belt. It was a boring job. Sam liked boring jobs. Boring jobs meant no one was shooting at him, no one was yelling at him, and no one was asking him to do anything except deliver boxes from one place to another. He had been doing this for 2 years now. Before that, he had spent 6 years flying supply runs for Earth's deep space fleet. Before that, he had grown up in a small town called Ashland in Ohio, where his mother ran a diner and his father fixed trucks. He was not a hero. He was not a soldier. He was a man who flew cargo ships and minded his own business. Then, the message came. The console in front of him beeped 3 times. That was unusual. 1 beep meant a routine signal. 2 beeps meant a priority message. 3 beeps meant the message was encrypted and came directly from Earth Central Command. Sam put down his noodles and stared at the screen. The message was short. It said he was to abandon his current delivery, change course immediately, and report to the military station on Phobos within 48 hours. A transport would be waiting for him. He was not to contact anyone. He was not to ask questions. The message ended with a single line that made his stomach drop. Classification level, absolute. By order of the United Earth Council. Sam read the message again. Then he read it a 3rd time. He had not spoken to anyone from Earth Central Command in 3 years. Not since the incident at the Valkyrie border. Not since he had stumbled into restricted space by accident, come face to face with a Valkyrie patrol ship the size of a mountain, and somehow talked his way out of being turned into dust. That event had lasted 47 minutes. Sam remembered every second of it. He remembered the way the alien ship had appeared out of nothing, filling his entire viewport with black metal and glowing lights. He remembered the voice that came through his speakers, deep, layered, like 3 people talking at once. He remembered the fear that had locked every muscle in his body. And he remembered what he had done. He had talked. Not because he was brave, because he was too scared to do anything else. He had opened a communication channel and just started talking. He told them who he was. He told them he was lost. He told them he was carrying frozen chicken and engine parts, and that he was no threat to anyone. The Valkyrie had listened. And then, for reasons no one on Earth could explain, they had let him go. That event had made Sam briefly famous. Military officials had questioned him for weeks. Scientists had studied every recording from this ship. News channels had called him the man who talked to the Valkyrie. Sam had hated every minute of it. When the attention finally died down, he went back to hauling freight and tried to forget the whole thing. Now Earth's Central Command was calling him back. He changed course for Phobos. When he arrived, he found a military transport waiting for him at the dock. 2 officers escorted him aboard without a word. The transport took him to Earth in 6 hours. A black car was waiting on the landing pad. It drove him to a building in Geneva with no windows and no signs on the door. Inside, he was taken to a conference room where 4 people were already sitting around a long table. The first was Nate Greer, Earth's senior ambassador to the Galactic Concord. Sam recognized him from news broadcasts. He was a tall man in his 60s, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been tired for about 20 years. He wore a dark suit and had the look of someone who had spent his entire career choosing his words very carefully. The second was Katie Lawson. She was younger, maybe early 30s, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She sat with a tablet in front of her, covered in notes written in at least 3 different alien scripts. Sam would later learn she was the best xenolinguist on Earth, one of only a handful of people who could partially read and speak the Velkhari language. The third was Danny Cole. They had served together years ago on a supply run to the outer colonies. Danny was a Marine sergeant, broad, solid, with a shaved head and hands that looked like they could crush rocks. He had a good heart buried under a lot of muscle and a bad temper. When Sam walked in, Danny looked up and gave him a small nod. His expression said he was just as confused as Sam. The fourth person was a woman in a military uniform that Sam did not recognize. She never introduced herself, never spoke, and never looked up from her screen. Sam decided not to ask about her. Nate Greer stood and shook Sam's hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes were uneasy. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Hayden," Nate said. "I know this is sudden." "Sudden is one word for it," Sam said. "I was in the middle of a delivery." "Your delivery has been reassigned. Please sit down." Sam sat. He looked around the table. Everyone looked serious. Katie was watching him with open curiosity. Danny was leaning back in his chair, with his arms crossed. Nate pressed a button on the table, and a holographic display appeared in the air above it. It showed a planet, dark, massive, wreathed in purple and gray clouds. "This is Eshari Prime," Nate said, "the homeworld of the Velkhari Dominion." Sam felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "I know what it is." 3 days ago, the Velkhari sent a formal message to every human government on Earth, on Mars, and in the colonies. It was not a request. It was a summons. Nate paused and looked at Sam. "Their queen, Sathari Velrun, has demanded that a human delegation appear before her court. She has given us 14 days to comply. No explanation, no agenda. Just a command to present ourselves on her world." The room was very quiet. "Why?" Sam asked. "We do not know," Nate said. "In the entire recorded history of the Galactic Concord, the Velkhari Queen has summoned another species to her court exactly 11 times. In 8 of those cases, the species was absorbed into the Dominion. In 2 cases, the species no longer exists." "And the 11th?" Katie asked. Nate hesitated. "The 11th species surrendered before they even arrived." Danny let out a low whistle. Sam stared at the dark planet floating above the table. "And you want me to go?" "You are the only human who has ever had direct contact with the Velkhari and survived," Nate said. "You spoke to them. They listened. Whatever happened in that 47 minutes, it meant something. We need you on this team." "I am a freight pilot," Sam said. "I know," Nate replied, "but right now you are the closest thing Earth has to a Velkhari expert." He wanted to say that he had no training for this, that he was the wrong person, that someone with actual experience in diplomacy should go instead of a man who spent most of his time eating cold noodles in deep space. But he looked at the planet again. He thought about the voice that had come through these speakers 3 years ago. He thought about those 47 minutes that had never fully left his mind. "When do we leave?" he said. Nate's shoulders dropped slightly, as if he had been holding his breath. "Tomorrow morning. The ship is the Resolute. It will take 11 days through 3 hyperspace corridors to reach Eshari Prime." Danny stood up. "Well, this should be fun." Katie closed her tablet and looked at Sam with a faint smile. "Do not worry. I have been studying the Velkhari language for 6 years. I know almost 40 words. 40 words, Sam repeated. Their language has over 12,000 root sounds, she said. 40 words is actually quite impressive. Sam looked at Danny. Danny shrugged. Great, Sam said. We are all going to die. Nobody laughed, but nobody disagreed either. The next morning, they boarded the Resolute.